The Angels of Caliban by Gav Thorpe delves into the heart of the Dark Angels Legion, unraveling the tensions and tragedies that haunt one of the Emperor's most complex legions. Set against the backdrop of Imperium Secundus, this novel reveals the schism between Lionel Johnson and his once trusted brother, Luther. As the galaxy burns in the fires of the Horus Heresy, the struggle for loyalty, justice, and identity ignites a brutal civil war on Caliban itself. In this extended review, we explore how Gav Thorpe intricately weaves a story of divided loyalties, moral ambiguity, and the corrupting allure of chaos. We break down the richly layered plot, analyze the characters' profound conflicts, and delve into the potent symbolism behind Caliban's enigmatic forces. Whether you're a dedicated fan of the Horus Heresy series or new to the saga, this review brings a deep, critical perspective to the ambitious tale of Angels of Caliban. A tale where brother fights brother, and every ideal carries the seeds of its own destruction. We can dive into the details of the storyline, focusing on the multifaceted conflicts that are central to the book. The story follows two primary threads, which occur in tandem and ultimately converge to propel the narrative towards the broader implications for the Horus Heresy and the Warhammer 40,000 universe. One of the main storylines in Angels of Caliban is centered on Caliban, the homeworld of the Dark Angels. At the beginning of the book, we see the seeds of discord that have been sown between Luther and Lionel Johnson grow into a full-blown rebellion. Luther, who was once Lionel Johnson's most trusted friend, has now become his rival, and this is partly due to feelings of resentment and a sense of abandonment. Lion's decision to leave Luther behind to govern Caliban while he pursued the Emperor's great crusade deeply affected Luther, and the isolation from the broader war effort and their brothers bred feelings of jealousy and dissatisfaction. Luther's character is portrayed as deeply conflicted. Initially, he had a genuine desire to see Caliban flourish and ensure that the Dark Angels on the home planet had a role to play. However, as time passed, his ambition grew, and his motivations became tainted by pride and the influence of chaos. The rebellion on Caliban eventually gains significant momentum, involving many of the Dark Angels who had been stationed there, and it transforms into an outright conflict with the Loyalists. This rebellion leads to the birth of what would later be known as the Fallen, the Dark Angels who turn against their brothers and embrace the power offered by chaos. One key event in the narrative is the pivotal meeting between Luther and Astartes, an influential member of the Dark Angels who shares Luther's grievances. Together, they plot to challenge the authority of Lionel Johnson and the Imperium. Astartes encourages Luther to expand his influence beyond Caliban, telling him, "The defense of Caliban is not enough. You must expand your base of power." This marks the beginning of a more aggressive stance, leading to the recruitment of warriors and the eventual preparation for an armed uprising. Another important aspect of the Caliban storyline is the influence of the Ouroboros, a mystical force tied to the very essence of Caliban. Zahariel, another key character who was once a knight of Caliban, becomes increasingly connected to the Ouroboros and begins to understand that it is not just a destructive force, but also represents the soul of Caliban itself. Zahariel's realization that the Ouroboros was Caliban reveals that the planet is alive, and the battle for its control is not merely a physical struggle, but also a spiritual one. The Ouroboros, which was initially thought to be a threat, becomes a symbol of Caliban's resistance against external domination, including the influence of the Imperium. The rebellion on Caliban ultimately culminates in open conflict, with the forces loyal to Luther fighting against those still loyal to Lionel Johnson. This struggle is portrayed as deeply tragic, as it represents the fracturing of the once unified Dark Angels Legion. The theme of brother fighting against brother is highlighted throughout the narrative, emphasizing the emotional toll of such a civil war. The second major storyline in Angels of Caliban takes place within Imperium Secundus, a temporary Imperium created by Robout Guilliman, Sanguinius, and Lionel Johnson in response to the perceived fall of Terra and the Emperor. Lionel Johnson's role in Imperium Secundus is complex, as he is pledged to act as its Lord Protector, yet he is also increasingly disillusioned by the situation. His pursuit of Conrad Kurz, the Primarch of the Night Lords, is a significant aspect of this storyline, adding a layer of personal vendetta to the political maneuvering of Imperium Secundus. Lionel Johnson is portrayed as relentless in his pursuit of Kurz, who had attempted to assassinate him previously. The Lion's determination to bring Kurze to justice reflects his rigid sense of order and desire for retribution. However, this pursuit also leads to tensions with Guilliman and Sanguinius, as the Lion's actions are seen as potentially jeopardizing the fragile stability of Imperium Secundus. The Lion's insistence on pursuing Kurz, even at the cost of alienating his allies, demonstrates his uncompromising nature and foreshadows the eventual collapse of the Imperium Secundus experiment. A significant moment in this storyline occurs when Lionel Johnson's obsession with capturing Kurz leads to a confrontation with Robout Guilliman. During this confrontation, Guilliman takes the Lion's sword and breaks it, symbolizing the deep rift that has formed between them. Guilliman declares, "Your sword for your oath. Such has become your honor, Knight of Caliban." This moment is a powerful representation of the ideological differences between the two Primarchs, with Guilliman favoring diplomacy and stability, while the Lion is driven by his desire for justice and vengeance. The dynamics within Imperium Secundus are further complicated by the presence of Sanguinius, who is portrayed as a reluctant leader. Sanguinius is deeply affected by the weight of his role as the figurehead of Imperium Secundus, and the visions of his own death that haunt him. His interactions with Lionel Johnson and Guilliman reveal the strain that the creation of Imperium Secundus has placed on their relationships. Despite their shared goal of protecting humanity, the differences in their approaches lead to increasing friction, ultimately making it clear that Imperium Secundus is not a sustainable solution. The storyline in Imperium Secundus also touches on the broader implications of the Horus Heresy, as the Primarchs grapple with the question of whether they should continue to fight for the Emperor or carve out their own path. The Lion's loyalty to the Emperor is unwavering, yet his actions are often seen as overbearing and authoritarian, which creates tension not only with his fellow Primarchs, but also within his own legion. The two main storylines, the rebellion on Caliban and the pursuit of Conrad Kurze within Imperium Secundus, eventually converge, highlighting the themes of divided loyalty and the consequences of rigid leadership. Lionel Johnson's determination to uphold the Emperor's ideals leads him to neglect the growing discontent on Caliban, which ultimately results in the fracturing of his legion. Meanwhile, his obsession with capturing Kurz drives a wedge between him and his allies, further isolating him at a time when unity is most needed. The climax of the novel is marked by the realization that the ideals of Imperium Secundus have been shattered. Lionel Johnson, Guilliman, and Sanguinius each come to understand that their attempt to create a safe refuge for humanity has failed, as their differences and personal ambitions have ultimately undermined their efforts. The rebellion on Caliban serves as a microcosm of the broader heresy, with the forces of chaos exploiting the divisions within the Dark Angels to turn brother against brother. In the end, Angels of Caliban leaves the reader with a sense of tragedy, as the once noble Dark Angels Legion is torn apart by internal conflict, and the hope that Imperium Secundus represented is extinguished. The novel effectively sets the stage for the subsequent events of the Horus Heresy, highlighting the themes of loyalty, betrayal, and the consequences of unyielding ambition. Lion L. Johnson, the Primarch of the Dark Angels, stands as a symbol of strength, tactical acumen, and unyielding discipline. However, in Angels of Caliban, his portrayal is far from that of an infallible leader. Throughout the novel, Gav Thorpe provides a nuanced depiction of Lion L. Johnson, highlighting not only his tactical brilliance but also his shortcomings as a leader, particularly in terms of his inability to truly connect with those around him. Lion's pursuit of Conrad Kurz is one of the central aspects of his character in this novel. He views Kurz as a threat that must be neutralized, not just to protect the Imperium Secundus, but also to uphold his own rigid sense of justice. This relentless pursuit puts him at odds with his brothers, Robot Guilliman and Sanguinius, and reveals his underlying desire for retribution. For instance, during a heated discussion, Sanguinius comments on Lion's actions, stating, "Mercy for that creature," to which Lion responds, "Execution, not murder. There can be no execution without trial." This exchange encapsulates the Lion's belief in lawful conduct, though his actions are often contradictory, given his relentless obsession with eliminating Kurz without a formal judgment. Lion's interactions with Guilliman are also charged with tension, often marked by a sense of rivalry and an unspoken critique of each other's approach to leadership. Guilliman, who is more inclined towards diplomacy, often finds himself at odds with Lion's uncompromising stance. This tension reaches its peak during a confrontation where Guilliman points out Lion's shortcomings as Lord Protector, saying, "Where was the Lord Protector? In theory, you are the guardian, but in practical terms you were of no use." This confrontation not only highlights the differing leadership styles of the two Primarchs, but also emphasizes the growing cracks within Imperium Secundus. Lion's character also reveals a level of arrogance, particularly in his belief that his judgment is superior. His assertion to Sanguinius that, "You are no ornament, Lord Sanguinius, but you are precious. We have staked everything on Imperium Secundus, and invested in you that power once held only by our father," illustrates his view that the fate of humanity rests heavily on their shoulders. Yet his words also carry an underlying sense of pressure and manipulation. Lion's inability to see beyond his own perception of duty and justice ultimately isolates him from those he needs the most, including his brothers and the warriors under his command. Luther is perhaps the most complex character in Angels of Caliban, serving as both an antagonist and a tragic figure whose motivations are far from straightforward. Initially, Luther was loyal to Lion L. Johnson and played a critical role in the Dark Angel's early victories. However, his feelings of abandonment and resentment grow as Lion distances himself, leaving Luther behind on Caliban to oversee the homeworld rather than join the ongoing crusades. This perceived demotion fuels Luther's frustration, and his resentment festers until it leads him to actively oppose the Lion. Luther's descent into rebellion is portrayed with nuance, as Gav Thorpe depicts him not as a simple villain, but as a character genuinely driven by the belief that he is acting in the best interests of Caliban. His motivations are not purely selfish. He sees himself as a protector of Caliban's people and culture, believing that the lion has become disconnected from his homeworld. In a speech to the Dark Angels, Luther declares, "The Imperium has already ended. We cannot choose a side unless we are certain that it will be victorious." This statement underscores his pragmatic, if cynical, worldview, as he believes that aligning with either the Emperor or Horus is a losing game without guaranteed success. Luther's charisma is also a key element of his character. He is able to rally many of the Dark Angels to his cause, using both his rhetorical skills and the help of Zahariel's psychic influence. During one of his speeches, he references the raising of Prospero by the Space Wolves, painting the Emperor as a tyrant who will destroy Caliban if they do not stand up for themselves. The Space Wolves, the Emperor's new weapon of choice. Barbarians who would slaughter a world of intellect and reason simply because they do not understand what it represents, he says, eliciting a strong reaction from his audience. Luther's ability to manipulate the emotions of his followers, coupled with his genuine belief in his cause, makes him a compelling and tragic figure, whose rebellion is as much about personal grievance as it is about ideological conviction. Zahariel's role in Angels of Caliban is multifaceted, as he serves as both a bridge between the mystical elements of Caliban and the political machinations of the Dark Angels. Initially introduced as a librarian with strong psychic abilities, Zahariel becomes increasingly involved in the mystical aspects of Caliban, particularly through his connection to the Ouroboros. His character arc is defined by his exploration of the deeper mysteries of Caliban, which eventually leads him to embrace the power of chaos. Zahariel's realization that the Ouroboros was Caliban is a pivotal moment in the novel, as it marks his acceptance of the planet's inherent power and his decision to align himself with Luther's cause. Unlike Luther, who is driven by political motivations, Zahariel's actions are motivated by his desire to protect Caliban's spiritual integrity. His growing bond with the Ouroboros represents a connection to the very essence of the planet, and he comes to view himself as its defender against the external forces that seek to exploit it. Zahariel also plays a crucial role in influencing the Dark Angels left on Caliban, using his psychic abilities to subtly manipulate their thoughts. The combination of Luther's rhetoric and Zahariel's mind play proves effective in swaying the loyalties of the Dark Angels, as he uses his powers to project images and emotions that align with Luther's message. Zahariel's alignment with chaos is portrayed not as an outright embrace of evil, but as a consequence of his belief in the righteousness of his cause, making his character one of the more morally ambiguous figures in the novel. Sanguinius and Guilliman, though not the central focus of Angels of Caliban, play significant roles in the narrative, particularly in their interactions with Lion L. Johnson within Imperium Secundus. Sanguinius is portrayed as a reluctant but charismatic leader, who is burdened with the role of Imperator Regis, the leader of Imperium Secundus. His demeanor is one of weariness, as he is haunted by visions of his own death and the weight of the decisions he must make. Sanguinius's relationship with Lionel Johnson is marked by both respect and tension. During a conversation with the Lion and Guilliman, Sanguinius reflects on the burden of leadership, stating, "All acts have consequences. Had I slain him in cold blood, the murder would be upon me." This statement underscores his belief in the moral implications of their actions. a belief that often puts him at odds with Lion's more rigid approach. Sanguinius is portrayed as the moral compass of the trio, attempting to mediate between the often conflicting ideals of his brothers. Robut Guilliman, on the other hand, is portrayed as the pragmatist, constantly trying to balance the needs of survival with the ideals of the Imperium. His relationship with Lionel Johnson is strained, as he often finds himself at odds with Lion's uncompromising stance. During a confrontation with Lion, Guilliman criticizes the Lion's actions, accusing him of being more interested in pursuing his vendetta against Kurz than in fulfilling his duties as Lord Protector. Orbital augurs suggest that our brother has been exceptionally vigorous of late. Tens of thousands dead, many more displaced, their homes and livelihoods destroyed, Guilliman says, highlighting the cost of Lion's pursuit of Kurz. Despite their differences, both Sanguinius and Guilliman recognize the importance of maintaining unity within Imperium Secundus. They understand that their survival depends on their ability to work together, even if they do not always agree with each other's methods. The dynamic between the three Primarchs adds depth to the narrative, as it highlights the challenges of leadership during a time of crisis and the differing philosophies that drive each of them. The character relationships in Angels of Caliban are fraught with tension, driven by differing ideologies and personal motivations. The relationship between Lionel Johnson and Luther is central to the novel, representing the tragic split between two once close allies whose diverging beliefs ultimately lead them to oppose each other. Lion's rigid adherence to the Emperor's vision and Luther's growing disillusionment create an irreparable rift, which is further exacerbated by the influence of chaos. The relationship between Lionel Johnson, Sanguinius, and Guilliman is similarly complex, marked by mutual respect but also underlying tension. Each Primarch has his own vision for the future of humanity, and their differing approaches to leadership create friction within Imperium Secundus. Lion's unyielding nature often puts him at odds with Guilliman's pragmatic approach, while Sanguinius attempts to mediate between them, burdened by his own visions of the future. Zahariel's role as a bridge between the mystical elements of Caliban and the political struggle adds another layer of complexity to the narrative. His alignment with Luther and his use of psychic abilities to influence the Dark Angels highlight the moral ambiguity that permeates the novel. Zahariel's belief in the righteousness of his cause, despite his alignment with chaos, makes him a compelling character whose actions are driven by a desire to protect Caliban's identity. The intricate character dynamics in Angels of Caliban add depth to the novel, highlighting the personal conflicts and ideological differences that drive the larger narrative. Each character is portrayed with nuance, their motivations shaped by a combination of loyalty, ambition, fear, and pride. The relationships between the characters serve as a microcosm of the broader conflict of the Horus Heresy, illustrating the tragic consequences of divided loyalties and unyielding ambition. Loyalty and betrayal are central themes in Angels of Caliban, and they manifest in various complex and interconnected ways, involving the Dark Angel's internal divisions, Luther's rebellion, and the overarching crisis of the Imperium. Throughout the novel, loyalty is depicted not as a black-and-white matter, but rather as a fluid and fragile commitment that is constantly tested by ambition, pride, and external forces. The tension between Lionel Johnson and Luther is at the heart of the theme of betrayal. Initially, Luther was wholly devoted to the Lion, serving as his trusted friend and second in command. However, when the lion leaves Luther behind to govern Caliban, instead of taking him to participate in the Great Crusade, it becomes a catalyst for Luther's growing resentment. This perceived slight deeply affects Luther, as he begins to feel as though he has been relegated to a lesser role. His sense of abandonment ultimately drives him to rebel against the lion. In a key moment, Luther states, "The Grand Master is correct. Caliban must be strong enough alone. Borrowed power is no power at all." This assertion reveals Luther's growing desire for independence, which directly conflicts with the loyalty he once had for the lion. Luther's journey from loyalty to betrayal is driven by a combination of personal ambition and genuine belief that he is acting in the best interest of Caliban. His decision to lead the rebellion is fueled by his desire to protect his home planet from what he perceives as external exploitation. He repeatedly uses examples from the past, such as the Emperor's order to raise Prospero, to justify his actions to the other Dark Angels, invoking the fear that Caliban might meet a similar fate. The Emperor's new weapon of choice: barbarians who would slaughter a world of intellect and reason simply because they do not understand what it represents, Luther says, referring to the space wolves and their destruction of Prospero. This line captures the fear and distrust that drives Luther's rebellion and ultimately his betrayal of Lionel Johnson. On the other hand, Lionel Johnson's loyalty to the Emperor and his vision for the Imperium remains unwavering throughout the novel, but his rigid adherence to these ideals is what ultimately alienates him from those closest to him. The lion sees himself as a paragon of loyalty, even to the point of being willing to confront his brothers when he believes they are acting against the interests of the Emperor. His determination to uphold the Emperor's ideals, however, blinds him to the growing discontent within his own legion, and contributes to the rift with Luther. Lion's loyalty to the Emperor is contrasted with his inability to understand the needs and perspectives of those under his command, ultimately leading to the betrayal of his closest confidant. The theme of betrayal extends beyond just the lion and Luther. It also encompasses the entire Legion, as the Dark Angels stationed on Caliban must choose sides between their loyalty to the lion or their allegiance to Luther. Zahariel, for instance, is swayed by his connection to the Ouroboros, and his belief that Caliban must be protected from the influence of the Imperium. He aligns himself with Luther, believing that his actions are in the best interest of Caliban, even if it means betraying the lion and the wider Imperium. The gradual shift of loyalties among the Dark Angels reflects the fragility of allegiance and the ease with which loyalty can be undermined by ambition, fear, and external influence. The struggle for power and control is another major theme in Angels of Caliban. This theme is illustrated not only in the battle for Caliban, but also in Lionel Johnson's involvement with Imperium Secundus and his pursuit of Conrad Kurz. Lion's desire for control is evident in his role as Lord Protector of Imperium Secundus, where he attempts to impose order amidst the chaos of the galaxy. However, his rigid approach and his obsession with pursuing Kurz often put him at odds with his allies, Sanguinius and Guilliman, as they perceive his actions as jeopardizing their collective efforts to create a refuge for humanity. Lion's interactions with Guilliman, in particular, highlight the tension between power and control. Guilliman, who prefers a more diplomatic and cooperative approach, often clashes with Lion's authoritarian tendencies. During one confrontation, Guilliman rebukes the lion for his heavy-handed methods, stating, "The lion granted me full tactical command, and I am exercising my right to invoke a Dreadwing assault." This line emphasizes Guilliman's frustration with Lion's need to take charge of every situation, even at the cost of alienating his allies. On Caliban, the struggle for power manifests through Luther's rebellion and his desire to establish autonomy for the planet. Luther's motivations are driven by his belief that Caliban should not be subject to the whims of off-world powers, whether it be the Imperium or Horus. He declares, Caliban will be free, ruled only by its sons and daughters. Luther's quest for power is portrayed as both a personal ambition and a means to protect Caliban from external threats. His decision to defy the Lion and align with chaos is depicted as a calculated move to gain the power needed to achieve his vision for Caliban's future. The influence of chaos further complicates the theme of power and control. As the rebellion on Caliban gains momentum, the malignancy of chaos's corruption begins to swell within Luther's movement. Zahariel's connection to the Ouroboros, a mystical force tied to the essence of Caliban, represents the allure of power and the temptation to use forbidden means to achieve one's goals. Zahariel's alignment with chaos is not an outright embrace of evil, but rather a consequence of his desire to protect Caliban and ensure its independence. This dynamic illustrates the corrupting influence of power and the lengths individuals are willing to go to in order to maintain control. The theme of justice is central to the character of Lion L. Johnson, particularly in his pursuit of Conrad Kurz. Lion views himself as an arbiter of justice, determined to bring his brother Kurz to account for his crimes against humanity. This pursuit is not just about maintaining order within Imperium Secundus, but also about upholding the ideals of the Emperor's vision for the galaxy. However, Lion's rigid and uncompromising view of justice often leads to conflict with his fellow Primarchs. In one notable scene, Sanguinius questions whether their pursuit of Kurz is truly just, or if it merely serves to fulfill the Lion's personal vendetta. Sanguinius remarks, "If he is such a destructive flame, why do we labor to give him the oxygen he requires?" This line encapsulates the moral ambiguity surrounding the pursuit of justice, as Sanguinius suggests that their actions may be playing directly into Kurz's hands by giving him the attention he craves. The theme of justice is thus portrayed as a double-edged sword, where the pursuit of righteousness can sometimes lead to unintended consequences. Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, represents a stark contrast to Lionel Johnson's sense of justice. Kurz's methods are brutal and driven by a belief that fear is the only way to maintain order. His actions are characterized by terror and brutality, serving as a dark reflection of the Lion's more lawful approach. The dynamic between Lion and Kurz highlights the subjective nature of justice and the different interpretations of what constitutes just behavior. While the Lion seeks to uphold the law, Kurz uses fear to enforce his own version of order, illustrating the complex and often conflicting nature of justice within the galaxy. Chaos and corruption are pervasive themes in Angels of Caliban, representing both a literal and metaphorical corruption of ideals and loyalties. The influence of chaos is particularly evident in the storyline on Caliban, where the whispers of the Ouroboros and the influence of chaos gradually lead Luther and his followers down a path of rebellion. Luther's alignment with chaos is portrayed as a gradual descent, driven by his sense of abandonment and his desire to protect Caliban. The Ouroboros, a mystical entity connected to the essence of Caliban, serves as a symbol of the planet's corruption. Zahariel's growing bond with the Ouroboros represents his connection to Caliban's soul and his willingness to embrace the power of chaos in order to protect his home. His realization that the Ouroboros was Caliban marks a turning point in his character, as he comes to see chaos as a means to an end, a way to ensure Caliban's survival and independence. This dynamic highlights the seductive nature of chaos and the ease with which noble intentions can be corrupted by the allure of power. Luther's decision to rebel against the lion is also influenced by the corrupting power of chaos. As the rebellion gains momentum, the malignancy of chaos's influence becomes more apparent, with Luther's once noble ideals becoming increasingly twisted by the whispers of the dark gods. Gav Thorpe emphasizes this transformation, stating, "The rebellion of Luther has borne glorious fruit for the order and Caliban. But in the heart of his movement, the malignancy of chaos's corruption starts to swell." This line underscores the insidious nature of chaos and its ability to corrupt even the most well-intentioned individuals. The theme of isolation is prevalent throughout Angels of Caliban, particularly in the portrayal of Lionel Johnson and Luther. Lion's isolation is both physical and emotional. His role as Lord Protector of Imperium Secundus often places him at odds with his brothers, and his rigid approach to leadership creates a sense of distance between him and those under his command. This isolation is further emphasized in his pursuit of Conrad Curze, as his obsession with bringing Curze to justice isolates him from his allies, Sanguinius and Guilliman, who view his actions as a potential threat to the stability of Imperium Secundus. Luther's isolation, on the other hand, is primarily emotional. Left behind on Caliban while the Lion takes part in the Great Crusade, Luther feels cut off from the broader conflict and increasingly marginalized by the Lion's decisions. This sense of isolation fuels his resentment and ultimately leads him to embrace chaos as a means to gain the power he believes is necessary to protect Caliban. As Luther states, the Order is Caliban, indicating his belief that their loyalty should lie with their home planet rather than the Imperium. This isolation ultimately becomes the driving force behind Luther's rebellion and his break from the Lion. The theme of brotherhood is also explored through the relationships between the Primarchs. The alliance between Lionel Johnson, Sanguinius, and Guilliman is portrayed as fragile, with each Primarch having his own vision for the future of humanity. The novel suggests that true brotherhood requires empathy and understanding, qualities that are often lacking in the relationships depicted. Lion's inability to empathize with Luther's frustrations and Guilliman's diplomatic approach further illustrates the fragility of brotherhood in the face of differing ideologies and personal ambitions. Gav Thorpe's narrative style in Angels of Caliban is richly detailed and complex, weaving multiple perspectives and timelines into a cohesive story. This detailed narrative helps bring the themes, character motivations, and intricate plots to life, contributing to the book's immersive quality. Thorpe uses a combination of third-person omniscient narration, alternating character perspectives, descriptive imagery, and vivid dialogue to shape the reader's understanding of the events and characters. Let's dive into a detailed analysis of how these elements contribute to the overall narrative experience. One of the most striking features of Thorpe's narrative style in Angels of Caliban is his use of multiple character perspectives to tell the story. The book switches between key players like Lionel Johnson, Luther, Zahariel, Sanguinius, and Robert Guilliman, among others. By giving voice to multiple characters, Thorpe allows the reader to explore the conflict from various angles and provides a nuanced view of the different motivations and ideologies that drive each character. For instance, the narrative switches between Lionel Johnson's pursuit of justice and Luther's desire for independence, showing how both characters believe they are acting in the best interests of their legion and Caliban. This shift in perspectives enables readers to see how misunderstandings, pride, and ambition lead to the tragic splintering of the Dark Angels. The juxtaposition of these viewpoints also emphasizes the theme of divided loyalties. The reader sees the same events from the contrasting perspectives of loyalty and rebellion, which brings to light the deep emotional conflicts underlying the Legion's division. Astalan's conversations with Zahariel and Luther also add depth to the narrative. In one instance, Astalan shares his views on the transformation of Caliban and the changes brought by the Imperium, which offers the reader insight into how different characters perceive these transformations as either progress or exploitation. In the scenes where Zahariel reflects on the Ouroboros, we are given a deeper understanding of the mystical connection to Caliban and the spiritual struggle for the planet's future. Thorpe uses vivid and descriptive imagery to create an atmosphere that reflects the underlying tensions of the story. His descriptions of Caliban, for instance, emphasize the natural beauty and raw power of the planet, which serves as a metaphor for the conflict between the Lion and Luther. Caliban is portrayed as both vibrant and dangerous, symbolizing the fractured nature of the Dark Angel's Legion itself. In the scenes where Zahariel realizes that the Ouroboros was Caliban, Thorpe uses lush and evocative imagery to describe the mystical essence of the planet. There was life, energy, everywhere, rising from the heart of the planet, coiling around the rocks and trees, soaring into the skies. This vivid portrayal of Caliban serves to emphasize the connection between the planet and its people and foreshadows the spiritual corruption that is to come. The symbolism of the Ouroboros as a representation of Caliban's soul adds a layer of depth to the narrative. The Ouroboros is not merely a destructive force, it is portrayed as the living essence of the planet, embodying its defiance and desire for freedom. This symbolism is crucial in understanding Zahariel's motivations and his eventual alignment with Luther. The imagery used to describe the Ouroboros highlights its dual nature. It is both a source of life and a potential agent of destruction, reflecting the duality of the characters' motivations and the choices they face. The dialogue in Angels of Caliban is another critical aspect of Thorpe's narrative style. The characters' conversations are used not only to advance the plot, but also to reveal their inner thoughts, motivations, and conflicts. For instance, the confrontations between Lionel Johnson and Gilliman are charged with tension, as their differing ideologies and approaches to leadership come to the forefront. During one confrontation, Gilliman's criticism of Lion's methods, "Your sword for your oath. Such has become your honor, Knight of Caliban," reveals the growing rift between them and highlights the ideological divide between the Primarchs. Thorpe also uses dialogue to emphasize the manipulative and charismatic nature of Luther. Through his speeches, Luther is able to sway many of the Dark Angels to his cause, using rhetoric that plays on their fears and frustrations. His declaration that Caliban will be free, ruled only by its sons and daughters, is a powerful statement that appeals to the loyalty of his followers to their homeworld, rather than to the distant Imperium. The use of emotionally charged language in Luther's speeches highlights his charisma and his ability to manipulate others, adding depth to his character and illustrating the theme of betrayal. The pacing of Angels of Caliban is deliberate, with Thorpe balancing action-packed sequences with slower, introspective moments. This balance allows the reader to fully grasp the significance of the characters' actions and the emotional weight of their decisions. The action scenes, such as the battles on Caliban and the pursuit of Conrad Kurz, are fast-paced and filled with tension, reflecting the chaos and unpredictability of war. In contrast, the slower scenes, such as Zahariel's reflections on the Ouroboros or the discussions between the Primarchs, provide the reader with insight into the characters' motivations and the broader implications of their actions. The narrative tension is maintained throughout the novel by the constant sense of impending conflict. The reader is aware that the situation on Caliban is rapidly deteriorating, and Thorpe uses this tension to keep the reader engaged. The juxtaposition of scenes on Caliban with those in Imperium Secundus adds to the sense of inevitability, as the reader knows that the paths of Lion and Luther are on a collision course. The use of foreshadowing, such as the hints of chaos influence on Luther's rebellion and the growing disillusionment among the Dark Angels, further adds to the narrative tension, creating a sense of dread as the story moves towards its climax. Thorpe's narrative style also reflects the broader context of the Horus Heresy series. The story of Angels of Caliban is deeply connected to the larger narrative of the heresy, and Thorpe makes frequent references to past events and other characters from the series. This integration into the larger storyline is achieved through both direct references and thematic continuity. For example, the ongoing struggle between Lion L. Johnson and Conrad Kurz is a continuation of the events from previous books, and Thorpe uses this ongoing rivalry to explore the theme of justice and retribution. The inclusion of characters like Gilliman and Sanguinius and their interactions with Lion also ties the story into the larger narrative of Imperium Secundus, emphasizing the interconnected nature of the Horus Heresy. Thorpe's ability to weave the individual storylines of Angels of Caliban into the larger context of the Horus Heresy is a testament to his skill as a storyteller. He not only tells the story of the Dark Angels, but also shows how their actions have repercussions for the broader conflict. The references to other events and characters serve to ground the story within the larger universe, giving the reader a sense of the scale of the heresy and the interconnected nature of the different Primarchs and their legions. Another key aspect of Thorpe's narrative style is his use of internal monologue and reflection to explore the inner thoughts of his characters. This technique is particularly effective in providing insight into the motivations and conflicts of characters like Luther, Lion L. Johnson, and Zahariel. Through their internal reflections, the reader gains a deeper understanding of the emotional and psychological struggles that drive their actions. For instance, Lion's reflections on his pursuit of Kurz reveal his sense of duty and his unwavering belief in justice, even as his actions alienate those around him. Similarly, Zahariel's reflections on the Ouroboros and his connection to Caliban provide insight into his growing alignment with chaos and his belief that he is acting in the best interest of his homeworld. The use of internal monologue also adds depth to the theme of isolation. Lion's reflections often reveal his sense of isolation from his brothers, as he struggles to understand their differing approaches to leadership. This sense of isolation is mirrored in Luther's internal monologue, as he grapples with his feelings of abandonment and his belief that he has been relegated to a lesser role. By providing the reader with access to the inner thoughts of these characters, Thorpe is able to convey the emotional weight of their decisions and the impact of their actions on their relationships with others. Thorpe employs symbolism and recurring motifs throughout the narrative to reinforce the themes of the story. One of the most prominent symbols in the novel is the Ouroboros, which represents the cyclical nature of power and corruption. The Ouroboros is depicted as both a source of power and a symbol of the corruption that ultimately consumes those who seek to control it. Zahariel's realization that the Ouroboros was Caliban symbolizes his acceptance of the power of chaos and his belief that this power is necessary to protect his homeworld. The motif of the great beasts of Caliban, which were once slain by the lion and his knights, also serves as a symbol of the untamed and dangerous nature of the planet. The great beasts represent the primal forces that the Dark Angels sought to control, and their destruction symbolizes the attempt to impose order on a chaotic world. However, the rebellion on Caliban and the influence of chaos suggest that these primal forces can never be fully controlled and will eventually resurface. This motif reinforces the theme of power and control, highlighting the futility of attempting to dominate forces that are inherently uncontrollable. Angels of Caliban holds a pivotal place in the Horus Heresy series, serving as a critical narrative link between various story arcs and providing essential context for both the Dark Angels and the Imperium Secundus. Gav Thorpe uses this installment to deepen the portrayal of the characters, themes, and conflicts, which are intricately connected to the broader Horus Heresy narrative. The rivalry between Lionel Johnson and Conrad Kurz forms one of the major through lines of the Horus Heresy, and its evolution plays a significant role in Angels of Caliban. This ongoing confrontation dates back to the Thramas Crusade, where the Dark Angels battled against the Night Lords, led by Kurz. The novel reflects on the groundwork laid by earlier stories, such as Savage Weapons and Prince of Crows, which established the ideological and personal enmity between the two Primarchs. This long-standing conflict provides a powerful context for Lion's relentless pursuit of Kurz in Angels of Caliban, an obsession that drives a significant portion of the plot and shapes Lion's characterization throughout the book. Thorpe presents this rivalry as more than just a personal vendetta. It becomes emblematic of the different leadership philosophies of the Primarchs. While Lionel Johnson sees himself as a champion of justice, determined to uphold order within Imperium Secundus, Conrad Kurz represents anarchy, using terror as a tool to enforce his own version of order. The clashes between Lion and Kurz, both physical and ideological, highlight the tension within the Imperium Secundus, reflecting the broader ideological divides that threaten to tear the Imperium apart. Imperium Secundus plays a crucial role in the context of Angels of Caliban, and within the Horus Heresy series as a whole. It is a provisional empire established by Sanguinius, Guilliman, and Lionel Johnson, in response to the perception that Terra may have fallen to Horus and Chaos. This emergency government is meant to preserve the ideals of the Emperor in the event that Terra is no longer viable as the center of the Imperium. Within this context, Lionel Johnson takes on the role of Lord Protector, which places him at the forefront of the struggle to maintain order and authority. Thorpe effectively portrays the inherent tensions within Imperium Secundus, particularly in the interactions between Lion, Guilliman, and Sanguinius. Each Primarch has his own vision for the future, and these differing visions lead to philosophical and personal conflicts that threaten to undermine the stability of Imperium Secundus. By the end of the novel, the collapse of Imperium Secundus seems inevitable, as its ideals and the foundations of its existence are deeply shaken. The collapse of Imperium Secundus and Lion's realization that he must return to Caliban mark a critical turning point in the series. Lion's decision to return to Caliban signifies a shift in focus from his role within the Imperium Secundus to the pressing matters at home, particularly the brewing rebellion led by Luther. This transition highlights the interconnected nature of the conflicts within the Horus Heresy, as events on Caliban have broader implications for the Imperium as a whole. The schism within the Dark Angels is another key aspect of Angels of Caliban that ties into the larger Horus Heresy narrative. The division between Lionel Johnson and Luther represents a microcosm of the broader conflicts within the Imperium. Conflicts driven by differing ideals, personal grievances, and the influence of chaos. Luther's rebellion on Caliban is portrayed as both a personal betrayal and an ideological split, as Luther becomes increasingly convinced that the Lion's rigid adherence to the Emperor's vision is detrimental to Caliban and its people. The internal conflict within the Dark Angels is not just about power, but also about identity and belonging. Luther and his followers see themselves as the true protectors of Caliban, while the Lion is viewed as having abandoned his home in pursuit of the Emperor's goals. This tension between loyalty to the Imperium and loyalty to one's home is a recurring theme throughout the Horus Heresy series, and Thorpe uses the schism of the Dark Angels to explore the complexities of loyalty and rebellion. Luther's decision to align with chaos is portrayed as a tragic but inevitable consequence of his disillusionment and desire for autonomy. This internal conflict within the Legion has significant implications for the larger narrative, as it foreshadows the eventual fall of Caliban and the splintering of the Dark Angels. The seeds of the fall of Caliban are sown throughout Angels of Caliban, as Thorpe depicts the growing influence of chaos on Luther and his followers. The portrayal of Zahariel's connection to the Ouroboros, a mystical entity representing the soul of Caliban, serves as a symbol of the planet's corruption and the gradual descent into rebellion. The influence of chaos is depicted as an insidious force, slowly corrupting the ideals of the Dark Angels and turning them against each other. The fall of Caliban is significant not only for the Dark Angels, but also for the broader Horus Heresy series, as it represents the fracturing of one of the Emperor's most loyal legions. The rebellion on Caliban is depicted as an inevitable consequence of the division between the old and new ways of the Dark Angels. The tension between the pre-Primarch Legion, represented by characters like Astalan, and the post-Primarch Legion, led by Lionel Johnson, is a recurring theme in the series and is central to the events of Angels of Caliban. One of the challenges Thorpe faced in writing Angels of Caliban was tying the events on Caliban, physically isolated from the broader conflict of the Horus Heresy, into the grander narrative of the series. Thorpe accomplishes this by emphasizing the broader implications of the Dark Angels' actions and their significance to the fate of the Imperium. The rebellion on Caliban is not just an isolated event. It has far-reaching consequences for the Imperium as a whole, as the fate of the Dark Angels and their legion plays a crucial role in the outcome of the heresy. Thorpe also uses the ongoing battles of Paladin Corswain, which occur off-screen in the novel, to connect the events on Caliban to the larger conflict. Corswain's actions are portrayed as critical to the wider war effort, emphasizing the interconnected nature of the battles being fought across the galaxy. By linking the rebellion on Caliban to the broader narrative of the Horus Heresy, Thorpe highlights the importance of the Dark Angels' story and its impact on the fate of mankind. Angels of Caliban ends with several key plot points left unresolved, setting the stage for future developments in the Horus Heresy series. The novel leaves the Dark Angels poised at a crucial moment, with the rebellion of Luther gaining momentum and the influence of chaos growing stronger. The collapse of Imperium Secundus and Lionel Johnson's decision to return to Caliban mark a significant turning point for the character and the Legion. The themes of loyalty, betrayal, and the corrupting influence of chaos, which are central to Angels of Caliban, are also themes that will continue to play a major role in the remainder of the Horus Heresy series. The unresolved tension between Lionel Johnson and his brothers, as well as the growing rift within the Dark Angels, foreshadows the tragic events that will ultimately lead to the fall of Caliban and the fragmentation of the Legion. Thorpe effectively sets the stage for these future developments, leaving readers with a sense of anticipation for what is to come. One of the book's greatest strengths lies in its nuanced portrayal of characters, particularly Lionel Johnson and Luther. Thorpe uses the multi-perspective narrative style to great effect, allowing readers to understand the conflicting motivations that drive the central characters. The Lion's rigid adherence to justice and order is shown in stark contrast to Luther's pragmatism and growing ambition. This dichotomy between duty and autonomy forms the emotional core of the book, highlighting the theme of divided loyalty within the Dark Angels. The depth of characterization allows for a rich exploration of the characters' choices, and Thorpe avoids presenting simple moral judgments, instead painting each character's actions as complex and multifaceted. The depiction of Lionel Johnson's pursuit of Conrad Curzy within Imperium Secundus also adds a significant layer to the book's narrative, exploring the conflict between justice and personal vendetta. Lion's obsession with capturing Curz not only reflects his unyielding nature, but also serves as a point of tension between him and his allies, Guilliman and Sanguinius. This tension is emblematic of the broader struggle within the Imperium, where loyalty to ideals often clashes with the need for compromise in the face of crisis. The narrative effectively captures the ideological differences between the Primarchs, highlighting their differing approaches to leadership and their shared burden of upholding the Emperor's vision. Thorpe's writing excels in creating vivid imagery and an immersive atmosphere. The descriptions of Caliban, particularly the scenes involving the Ouroboros, are richly detailed and evocative, symbolizing the planet's defiance and spiritual essence. Zahariel's realization that the Ouroboros was Caliban marks a pivotal moment in the story, underscoring the deep connection between the planet and its people and serving as a powerful symbol of the struggle for identity against external domination. The exploration of power and control is another major strength of the narrative. The struggle for power is depicted on multiple levels, between the Lion and Luther, within Imperium Secundus, and in the broader context of the Imperium's fight for survival. Lionel Johnson's desire for control is portrayed as both a strength and a weakness, while his determination to uphold order is admirable. His inability to empathize with those around him ultimately alienates his allies and contributes to the fragmentation of his legion. The theme of control is also explored through Luther's alignment with chaos, which represents both a means to gain power and the corrupting influence of that power. Thorpe effectively uses these themes to highlight the fragile nature of authority and the dangers of unchecked ambition. In Angels of Caliban, Gav Thorpe employs rich symbolism, particularly centered around the Ouroboros, to convey deeper layers of meaning within the story. The Ouroboros, a mystical serpent-like entity tied to Caliban, serves as a key symbol of the planet's essence, reflecting both the beauty and corruption inherent in the narrative. The Ouroboros is portrayed not just as a malevolent entity, but as an embodiment of Caliban itself, an inextricable part of the planet's nature. Zahariel's revelation that the Ouroboros was Caliban represents a profound moment of understanding that defines his later actions. This realization shatters Zahariel's previous understanding of the Ouroboros as an enemy, allowing him to embrace the entity and see it as Caliban's soul. The Ouroboros symbolizes the cyclical nature of power, corruption, and resistance. Its presence serves as a reminder of the deep connection between the planet's people and the mystical forces that dwell within it. Caliban, long subdued by the Imperium and shaped to fit within the Emperor's vision, resents these imposed changes. This resentment is encapsulated in the imagery of a sheathing of blackness that has turned the tendrils of Caliban's energy into shackles rather than anchors. Caliban itself is depicted as straining against these bonds, attempting to break free from the constraints imposed by the lion and the Imperium. The Ouroboros also serves as a symbol of the corrupting influence of chaos. As Zahariel comes to align himself with the Ouroboros, he becomes increasingly influenced by its power, symbolizing the subtle way in which chaos can take hold of even the most devoted and loyal individuals. The fact that Zahariel no longer sees the Ouroboros as something to be destroyed, but instead something to be embraced, shows his shift towards a more radical view of Caliban's independence. This shift in Zahariel's perspective mirrors the broader rebellion on Caliban, where the quest for freedom and identity gradually becomes tainted by the influence of chaos. The great beasts of Caliban, mentioned throughout the book, also serve as powerful symbols. These creatures, once slain by Lionel Johnson and his knights, symbolize the untamed and primal nature of Caliban before the arrival of the Imperium. The destruction of the last of the great beasts marks the beginning of the planet's subjugation and the loss of its independence. Thorpe uses these creatures to represent the raw, unbridled power of Caliban that refuses to be fully controlled. Their destruction is seen as an attempt by the Imperium to impose order on a chaotic world. But the rebellion led by Luther and Zahariel suggests that this primal power can never be fully contained. The symbolism of the great beasts ties into the theme of identity and autonomy. The rebellion on Caliban, fueled by Luther and Zahariel's desire to break free from the influence of the Imperium, can be seen as an attempt to revive the spirit of these great beasts, the untamed essence of Caliban that refuses to be dominated. The imagery used to describe the planet, with energy rising from the heart of the planet, coiling around the rocks and trees, soaring into the skies, reflects the undying spirit of Caliban that seeks freedom from external control. The characters in Angels of Caliban are complex and multifaceted, and Thorpe uses symbolism to enhance their portrayal. Lion L. Johnson, for instance, embodies the ideals of loyalty and duty, yet his character is marked by contradictions. He is portrayed as a paragon of order, striving to uphold the Emperor's vision, yet his rigid adherence to these ideals often blinds him to the needs and desires of those around him. The Lion's pursuit of Conrad Kurz, and his role as Lord Protector of Imperium Secundus, highlight his unyielding nature and his belief in justice, but also his inability to compromise and empathize with others. This lack of empathy ultimately contributes to the fragmentation of his legion and the growing discontent among his closest allies. Luther, on the other hand, is portrayed as a tragic figure whose motivations are complex and often conflicting. He is driven by a genuine desire to protect Caliban and its people, yet his ambition and resentment towards the Lion lead him down a darker path. The rebellion he leads is fueled by a sense of abandonment and a belief that the lion has betrayed the values they once shared. The symbolism of Luther aligning himself with the Ouroboros reflects his descent into chaos, as he becomes increasingly willing to use any means necessary to achieve his goal of independence for Caliban. Luther's declaration that Caliban will be free, ruled only by its sons and daughters, captures his desire for autonomy, but also hints at the corrupting influence of power that ultimately consumes him. Zahariel's character arc is also marked by significant complexity. Initially a loyal librarian of the Dark Angels, Zahariel's journey is one of gradual disillusionment and alignment with chaos. His connection to the Ouroboros represents his growing identification with Caliban and his rejection of the Imperium's influence. The Ouroboros serves as both a symbol of Caliban's soul and the corrupting power of chaos, and Zahariel's decision to embrace it reflects his belief that the only way to protect Caliban is to break free from the chains of the Imperium. This belief is reinforced by his realization that the teachings of the Librarius and the Emperor were merely a cloud to obscure true knowledge, and that the true essence of Caliban lies in the primal power of the Ouroboros. The complexity of brotherhood and betrayal is a recurring theme in Angels of Caliban, and Thorpe uses the characters of Lionel Johnson, Luther, and Zahariel to explore these ideas. The relationship between Lion and Luther is central to the narrative, and their eventual conflict is portrayed as both a personal betrayal and an ideological split. The Lion's inability to understand Luther's perspective and his rigid adherence to duty creates a rift between them that ultimately leads to rebellion. Luther's betrayal is not portrayed as a simple act of defiance, but rather as the culmination of years of resentment, frustration, and a genuine belief that he is acting in the best interest of Caliban. Zahariel's loyalty is also tested throughout the narrative, and his decision to align himself with Luther and the Ouroboros reflects the complex nature of loyalty within the Dark Angels. His journey from loyal librarian to agent of chaos is portrayed with nuance, highlighting the allure of power and the moral ambiguity of his actions. Zahariel's belief that the Ouroboros represents the true essence of Caliban, and his desire to protect it, drives him to reject the lion and align himself with Luther. This alignment is not without its challenges, as Zahariel must come to terms with the implications of his actions and the impact they have on the Legion and the broader conflict. Luther's character can also be seen as a symbol of Caliban's struggle for independence and identity. His desire to break free from the influence of the Lion and the Imperium mirrors the planet's desire to break free from the chains imposed upon it by external forces. The imagery used to describe Luther's alignment with the Ouroboros, his declaration that the Order is Caliban, and his belief that the Ouroboros will free them from the Imperium, reflects his deep connection to the planet, and his belief that true freedom can only be achieved by embracing its primal power. Luther's struggle is portrayed as both noble and tragic. His desire to protect Caliban and its people is genuine, but his methods and his willingness to align with chaos ultimately lead to his downfall. The complexity of Luther's character lies in his ability to inspire loyalty and his belief in the righteousness of his cause, even as his actions become increasingly influenced by the corrupting power of chaos. This complexity is captured in his interactions with the other Dark Angels, as he uses both rhetoric and manipulation to sway them to his cause, appealing to their loyalty to Caliban and their fear of the Imperium's intentions. One of the notable aspects of Angels of Caliban is its integration into the larger Horus Heresy series. Thorpe effectively ties the events on Caliban into the broader conflict of the heresy, making the story relevant not only to the Dark Angels, but also to the wider Imperium. The narrative explores the implications of Imperium Secundus and the ideological differences between the Primarchs, particularly Lionel Johnson, Guilliman, and Sanguinius. This integration into the larger storyline adds depth to the book and provides context for the decisions made by the characters, highlighting the interconnected nature of the Horus Heresy. Thorpe's use of historical context within the Horus Heresy is also noteworthy. By referencing past events, such as the Thramas Crusade and the ongoing rivalry between Lion and Curze, Thorpe creates a sense of continuity and emphasizes the long-term consequences of the characters' actions. The references to past conflicts and the use of characters like Guilliman and Sanguinius help to ground the story within the larger universe, giving the reader a sense of the scale and significance of the events taking place. While Angels of Caliban is a compelling and well-crafted entry in the Horus Heresy series, there are areas where the narrative could be improved. One of the main weaknesses of the book is its pacing, particularly in the middle sections. The narrative often shifts between different characters and locations, which can make the story feel disjointed at times. While the multi-perspective approach adds depth to the characters and themes, it also slows down the pacing and can make it difficult for the reader to stay fully engaged with the main plot. This is particularly evident in the scenes involving the political dynamics of Imperium Secundus, which, while important to the overall story, can feel overly drawn out and detract from the more action-oriented sequences on Caliban. Another area for improvement is the portrayal of certain secondary characters, who at times feel underdeveloped compared to the main protagonists. While characters like Lionel Johnson, Luther, and Zahariel are given significant depth, others, such as Astelan and Balath, could have been explored further to provide a more well-rounded view of the events on Caliban. Their motivations and actions are often presented in a more straightforward manner, lacking the complexity that makes the main characters so compelling. Providing more insight into these secondary characters would have added additional layers to the narrative and helped to enhance the reader's understanding of the internal divisions within the Dark Angels. Angels of Caliban by Gav Thorpe is a rich and powerful addition to the Horus Heresy series that skillfully ties together multiple narrative threads, character arcs, and complex themes. The novel not only delves into the internal schisms within the Dark Angels, but also examines the broader impact of these divisions on the fate of the Imperium and the galaxy. By exploring the dynamics between Lionel Johnson, Luther, Zahariel, and other key characters, Thorpe presents a nuanced portrayal of loyalty, power, and the struggle for autonomy. One of the most compelling aspects of the novel is how it situates the struggles of the Dark Angels within the larger narrative of the Horus Heresy. The fall of Caliban and the ideological schism between Lionel Johnson and Luther are not just isolated incidents, but are deeply tied to the fate of the Imperium Secundus and the larger galactic civil war. The narrative is effective in showing that the rebellion on Caliban, though seemingly peripheral compared to the broader conflict involving Horus and Terra, has ramifications that will ripple across the galaxy. The tension between personal ambition, loyalty to one's homeworld, and the demands of the Imperium is portrayed with depth and complexity, highlighting the tragic consequences of the Dark Angels' internal divisions. Thorpe uses vivid symbolism throughout the book, particularly through the character of Zahariel and his connection to the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros, representing both the soul of Caliban and the corrupting influence of chaos, becomes a symbol of the struggle for freedom, identity, and power. Zahariel's journey from loyal librarian to agent of chaos embodies the seductive allure of power and the complex interplay between loyalty and betrayal. The themes of control and corruption are central to the narrative, as Zahariel and Luther's actions reveal the fragility of loyalty in the face of ambition and the desire for autonomy. The tension between the pre- and post-Primarch Legion members adds further complexity to the story, reflecting the difficulties in reconciling old loyalties with new orders. Another key strength of Angels of Caliban is its portrayal of Imperium Secundus and the ideological differences between the Primarchs, Lion L. Johnson, Guilliman, and Sanguinius. Thorpe effectively captures the philosophical conflicts that arise from the creation of Imperium Secundus and the challenges in maintaining unity in the face of crisis. These differences are not just abstract debates. They have real consequences for the fate of the Imperium and the individuals involved. The tension between Lion's unyielding sense of justice and Guilliman's pragmatism is portrayed with nuance, highlighting the challenges of leadership in a time of crisis. The dissolution of Imperium Secundus by the end of the novel reflects the inherent fragility of their vision, as the ideals of unity and justice are ultimately undone by internal divisions and the overwhelming threat of chaos. The narrative also succeeds in providing a compelling exploration of the theme of justice versus vengeance. Lionel Johnson's pursuit of Conrad Kurz is depicted as more than just a personal vendetta. It is a reflection of his belief in justice and the need to uphold order. However, his actions are often seen as rigid and uncompromising, creating tension with his allies and contributing to the growing discontent within the Legion. Thorpe's portrayal of Lion as a complex character, whose strengths are also his weaknesses, adds depth to the narrative and highlights the tragic consequences of his inability to compromise or empathize with those around him. The fall of Caliban is a significant turning point in the Horus Heresy series, and Angels of Caliban effectively sets the stage for future developments. The rebellion, led by Luther, and the growing influence of chaos foreshadow the tragic events that will ultimately lead to the fragmentation of the Dark Angels and the loss of their homeworld. Thorpe's depiction of the growing tension on Caliban, the ideological divide between Luther and Lion, and the influence of chaos serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of loyalty and the ease with which ambition and resentment can lead to betrayal. The use of multiple character perspectives allows the reader to understand the motivations behind each character's actions, making the eventual fall of Caliban all the more poignant and tragic. In conclusion, Angels of Caliban is a masterfully crafted novel that weaves together complex character dynamics, rich symbolism, and profound themes to create a compelling narrative that is both deeply personal and epic in scope. Gav Thorpe's exploration of the schism within the Dark Angels, the ideological conflicts within Imperium Secundus, and the growing influence of chaos provides a rich and engaging story that is essential to understanding the broader Horus Heresy series. The novel not only deepens the portrayal of the Dark Angels and their internal struggles, but also highlights the broader implications of their actions for the fate of the Imperium. With its intricate plot, vivid imagery, and nuanced characterizations, Angels of Caliban is a powerful and thought-provoking addition to the Horus Heresy series that leaves readers eagerly anticipating the next chapter in this epic saga.